highly anticipated consumer price index data was just released by StatsCan, with the Bank of Canada overnight rate currently sitting at 4.25% and Canadians pleading for more rate cuts. We'll go over whether this data was enough to support them going forward. Canada's annual inflation rate slowed more than expected, coming in at 1.6% for the month of September. This is the slowest annual increase we've seen in the consumer prices since February of 2021. One of the biggest contributors to this downward pressure on overall CPI was gas prices. There was a 10.7% decline in September in gas prices compared to a 5.1% decline in August in gas prices. So this is a reason why CPI came in lower than expected. With this data and with inflation cooling quicker than expected, the markets have now priced in a 50 basis point rate cut for the next Bank of Canada meeting. They've priced this in at a 67% likelihood that the Bank of Canada will cut 50 basis points over the normal 25 basis point rate cut that is normally expected. There are real concerns now that the economy will slow quicker than expected and inflation will go down quicker than expected. So Bank of Canada will now likely take preventative measures to get ahead of that before the economy gets too bad, quote unquote. We're seeing less consumer spending for sure. Small businesses are struggling and the overall economy all around just feels slower. I think everybody can probably agree with that. On top of all this, when the CPI data was released, the Canadian dollar dropped to a 10-week low versus the US dollar, and we saw bond yields go down. So that signals that the market is pricing in more rate cuts in Canada. Back to gasoline prices for a second. StatsCan showed that the CPI actually without gasoline prices is still sitting at 2.2%. Although that's important to be aware of, gas prices affect so many industries. So looking at the CPI without gasoline, I think is kind of silly, because if you think of all of the industries that are dependent on gasoline or transportation in some way, and that puts their price of goods up or down and their profit margins up or down, it's massive. Shelter prices, which we've touched on before, are very correlated with higher rates, are easing a little bit, but are still elevated at 5%, with rent coming in at 8.2% year over year and mortgage interest costs leading the charge at 16.7% year over year.
We're not doing a house price index or benchmark price video this month, but it's worth noting because it's directly related to rates, the strength of the economy, and CPI, where we see the benchmark price and house price index falling in our major metros across the country. So in Greater Toronto, we're down, trending downwards for 5 months straight since April of 2024. Greater Vancouver had a little uptick in May, but they've been trending downwards as well, and Canada as a whole down for the last 5 months. So this is definitely something that Bank of Canada will also consider, the strength of the housing market, when they make their interest rate decision on October 23rd.
After this data release, I think it's almost a shoo-in for Bank of Canada to cut rates by 50 basis points on October 23rd, and you can see that the market feels the same way. As I've touched on before in previous videos, most buyers right now are taking fixed rate mortgages, and fixed rate mortgages already have these rate cuts priced in, and especially in today's environment, the fixed rate is dramatically lower than the variable rate. So we're seeing most people take these fixed mortgages. Although we saw bond yields fall slightly, we still have most of these cuts priced in. So will this 50 basis point rate cut on October 23rd spur more activity in buyers, or will it do the opposite like it did in previous times where we see more sellers come to the market because they're seeing Bank of Canada cut rates? Now it's a good time to sell because rates are on the decline, and when rates go down, home prices go up. And in a vacuum, that could be true, but as I've said again in the past, a market, real estate market, any market, is supply and demand. More sellers in the market, less buyers, there's pressure on prices downwards. More buyers in the market, less sellers, there's pressure on prices upward. So it's yet to be seen what will happen, but it will be interesting to see what the Bank of Canada does on October 23rd. Thank you guys for watching this video, and see you next week.